Turn down the music and welcome everybody to our first Zoom virtual book launch party. This is I'm Tom Lemons, and I'm the editor-in-chief at Texas A&M University Press. I'm also proud to be the editor who worked with Tracy and Hart to put together this amazing book on Stevie Ray Vaughan. And so what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about the book, and we're going to talk a lot about Stevie Ray, because not only is this about Tracy's book and her fabulous photography, but it's also another chance to pay tribute to a musician that we all admire and that we miss greatly, Stevie Ray Vaughan. The book is out. It's available for purchase. And at the end of the event, we'll make sure that you know that we're going to provide you with a discount code, so that you can get your copy at a little bit of a discount based on our pre-orders. It looks like if you want a first edition, you might want to jump on that, because the books are going pretty quick. So don't wait too late to snag that. This event, this Zoom book launch event, is being co-sponsored by Texas A&M University Press, and our esteemed partner and sponsor of our John and Robin Dixon series in Texas music, which is the Center for Texas Music History at Texas State University. And the director of the center is Jason Millard, who's also with us tonight. And Jason, I'm going to toss it to you for a second if you want, so you can say a couple of words about the Center for Texas Music History and the Dixon series, or whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Should I take it, or?
Nope, it's Jason. He's unmuting his microphone.
Oh, okay. My microphone isn't on?
No, you're good.
Yeah, it's
okay.
There he is.
Unmuted by the host.
Oh,
I just wanted to give a quick plug for the Center for Texas Music History. We were founded by Dr. Gary Hartman at Texas State University in San Marcos about 20 years ago. And we are very proud of our partnership with Texas A&M Press and the John and Robin Dixon series in Texas music history, of which Tracy Ann Hart's book is the latest volume. We also host campus and community events in San Marcos. We teach classes on Texas music history in San Marcos, and have become one of the sort of leading research centers on the rich musical heritage and history of the Lone Star State. We also publish an annual journal of Texas music history, and if you're interested in the topic tonight, we just recently in our last print version had an article on Charlie Sexton by Jason Crouch that also was accompanied by some of Tracy and Hart's terrific images. If any of this stuff is something that you're interested in, you can email me at jasonmellard@txstate.edu. And I'm also going to drop a link in the chat where you can find more of those Dixon series books and the Journal of Texas Music History, of which our back issues are all digitized and free to the public. And you can also get a print subscription for free just by contacting us about that. So I just wanted to thank A&M Press again for having us here to host this event, and thinking outside of the box. I want to thank Tracy and Hart for a terrific book, Eric Tesmer for joining us on this and his forward to the book as well, and just really looking forward to what people have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank
and
you.
I hope you'll speak up more later. As you mentioned, we are also very happy to have with us tonight, in addition to Tracy, the author and photographer for the book, we've got guitarist, musician Eric Tesmer, who was recently named Best Guitarist in Austin in the 2018 Austin Chronicle poll for the Austin Music Awards. So we're proud to have him, and he is certainly a disciple and a devotee of Stevie Ray's music, and makes his own music as well, which is dang good. So Eric, we're glad to have you here tonight. Also,
happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So we're going to check out some of Tracy's favorite photographs from the book, and we're going to talk about the stories behind them, what was going on when Tracy got the shot. And Eric and Jason, as I mentioned, you guys jump in anytime you want and add some color commentary, if you will. And hopefully we've got some guitar players listening and watching tonight, because we really want to get into some of the gear. Tracy did an amazing job of capturing not only Stevie Ray, but also a lot of the stuff about his playing and his equipment and stuff. And so there's going to be some interesting things that we'll talk about along that line. And then Tracy, of course, we want you to feel free to talk about your photography techniques, you know, what was going on with the light, with the lens, with the, or whatever, what you were using and why you were using it. And then after we've gone through the slideshow of images from the book, we want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. And what we'd like for you to do is, if you'll use the chat button on your Zoom screen, you can direct the questions to me in the little pull down box. I'm Tom Lemons, and I will moderate those questions and pass them over to Tracy or Eric or whomever. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. I can't promise you that we'll get to all of them within the time we have available, but we will certainly do our best to get to as many of them as you can. And by the way, speaking of the chat box, I noticed, Jason, that you put up your link for the Center for Texas Music History, and folks who are interested in the multifaceted history of music in the great state of Texas. You really would do yourself a favor by getting to be good friends and getting to be familiar with the Center for Texas Music History and their website and their resources. I mean, they are really telling the story, everything from gospel to blues to jazz to classical, you name it. It's all part of the great river of Texas music. And so Jason and his colleagues over at the center are doing a great job of documenting all that. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you want to get a question on the board, just use your chat button and direct it to me, Tom Lemons, and we'll gather those up. And then when we get through the slideshow, we'll ask as many of those as we can. And I think we should just go ahead and get into it. So let's transition over to Tracy, and here you can see the cover of the book, and what a fantastic photograph it is. And obviously, Tracy, mostly the book is about your photography of Stevie Ray, but I hope that you'll take just a couple of minutes right now at the beginning to talk a little bit about, introduce yourself and talk about how you got started taking photographs of maybe one of the greatest guitar players of all time and what that was like, and just kind of give us a lead into the book, if you will.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's about 5 or 6 questions there. How I got into photography at all was that my dad was a professional photographer, and he invented a lot of techniques for photographing the inner eye. His specialty was medical photography, obviously, but there were always cameras around the house, just like if your dad's a guitar player and there's guitars around the house. But I didn't really pay that much attention to them, to the cameras, until I went to college in Austin for a couple of years, and I met a guy who was a really good guitar player, and he was sort of my boyfriend, and I naturally thought, well, I should take pictures of him. And that's how I got into music photography. And he told me things like, you know, a guitar player wants to see the guitar. You don't just do like a tight close-up of his face. He wants to see the guitar and detail and all that stuff. So that's how that all got started. And then I think we have a picture from the first show of Stevie's that I photographed.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get into the slideshow. Okay. So go ahead and talk about this picture.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's several things about this photograph. First of all, this was the first show I shot of Stevie. It was March of 1983 at Fitzgerald's in Houston. And I met him backstage. I was working for a new wave music paper. And when they found out that he was doing an album with David Bowie, they said, oh, we got to talk to him. We got to interview him. Because he'd been doing like 2 nights a month at Fitzgerald's for years. And once, you know, the thing got going with David Bowie, well, then people thought, oh, well, you know. And Bowie, of course, had an incredible knack for picking really great guitar players throughout his career. but he really hit the jackpot with Stevie. So we met Stevie and talked to him, and I was just right off the bat at a sound check. The sound check, after we talked to him for a few minutes, you know, he put everything into his sound check. He was playing as if there was a crowd of a few thousand watching him, and because, you know, it was just him and his guitar. As Freddie King might say. But anyway, it was just incredible to see that kind of intensity, because I was getting to a point at that time in 1983 where I was very much into technique and equipment, and you know, I just, you know, I'd go into my own little world when I was shooting. So relating to that very strongly, and of course the Hendrix thing too, because I missed Hendrix by several years. I was way too young to shoot him, and that was a constant regret. So then there's this guy playing this incredible version of Third Stone from the Sun in the sound check, and wearing that T-shirt, that Lines of the Universe T-shirt, and on his beat-up guitar, which sounded incredible. What I did here, I was using Leicas, small rangefinder cameras, which are really great for clubs, with a fill flash. And I slowed down the shutter speed and did what's called dragging the shutter to get that sort of ambient light. I call it an ambient afterbeat effect, which to me is very much like controlled feedback. And so this is one of my favorites, because he's smiling. He's obviously having a good time up there on stage. And so actually, I think we could talk a little bit about the allegedly 1959 Strat that Stevie's playing.
Is that number one?
That's number one.
That is number one, yeah.
When the paint's starting to come off it.
What Eric, tell us a little bit about number one. Tell us what you know.
Well, number one is actually, he always claimed it was a 59, was actually found out later as a 63. He thought it was a 59 because on the back of the pickups, when you take them off, it was in pencil, it was written 1959. It was a pretty common practice of the Fender factory to use like just a big mixed up pile of parts. And it's also possible that somebody changed those pickups before he got it. He bought that guitar at Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas here in Austin, which is now gone, but the original owner, or whoever traded it into Heart of Texas, was actually Christopher Cross.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, like, you know, Strats get around. They're really easy to work on guitars. So, I mean, who knows if those pickups were from the factory or some guy had them laying around and just stuck them in there. But talk about a match made in heaven. Another thing about it is that it's got the a left-handed trem on it. And we were talking about this just the other day, how I think he was somewhere in Southeast Texas, and the bridge broke on the guitar and he had to get it fixed. And the only one they had was a left-handed. Put it in, and it's more like Hendrix because the bar hangs across the strings. You don't have to reach down to grab it. So.
Right.
Okay, one other thing about this guitar that relates directly to photography. I love a black pickguard, because when you have like a black guitar with a white pickguard, it's very hard to get detail on it, which you want to do.
It washes out, right?
Yeah, because when you look at a photograph, your eye immediately goes to the whitest part of the picture, or the brightest part of the picture. So a black pickguard is a blessing.
Tracy, I want to back up to a comment you made about the effect that you did with the exposure here, and you referred to it as, and I probably won't get your term exactly right, but you referred to it as almost like visual feedback. And I love the way that you, the consciousness that you brought to, well, all the photographs in the book, but this is just an example, the way that you match your technique and your shot to what you're hearing and seeing when you're taking the shot. I just think that's super cool. And I think you're right. It does look like visual feedback, you know, like what you're hearing.
I kind of like the way the light's dripping off the frets, especially.
Yeah.
One other thing, it's an interesting coincidence, if you want to call it a coincidence, if you believe in that, that Stevie Ray Vaughan was born in 1954. The Leica M3, the modern version of the Leica, which is the camera I was using, was brought out in 1954, and Fender brought out the Strat in 1954. So, you know, that's kind of cool.
I think Carl Jung would refer to that as a synchronicity.
I think so, yes, strangely enough. Good old Carl.
Let's take a look at some more photographs.
Okay.
This is the image that we used, of course, on the front of the book that you've already seen. And I just can't tell you how much I love this image. And I love, of course, in addition to it being an unbelievably amazing photograph, we have some very talented book designers that work for us. And this photograph, for me, just really does such a cool job of capturing the theme of the book, because it's about seeing Stevie Ray, but you can't quite see him because he's behind that hat brim. Just talk about this photograph, Tracy, and where and when, how, what was going on.
Okay. Well, it couldn't be anybody but Stevie, right? Even though you can't see all of his face. Well, first let me tell you where it was taken. It was taken in Austin at the Rites of Spring show in May of 1990, and on Auditorium Shores, not far from where the statue is now. And that, of course, again, is number one, and he's playing Voodoo Child. And it was just one of the best shows by anyone that I have ever seen. It was just amazing. And I think I said something in the book to the effect where if this had been the last photograph I'd ever taken, it's a good punctuation mark for my career. And I'll tell you what influenced, actually while I was shooting, it's kind of like a baseball pitcher. All this stuff goes through your head, but you can't just stop and think. You have to just let it flow. It's kind of in the background.
Right.
But Milton Green took a very famous photograph of Marlene Dietrich, the actress, and she was famous for her beautiful legs and her beautiful hairstyle, and that she had her whole life, beautiful blonde hair. And there's a photograph that Milton Green took of her where she's got her head down. You just see her hair over most of her face, and her legs are stretched out the way the neck of the guitar is. And it's a dark background. And that was my influence for this photograph. Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing photograph. And then I think some of the most amazing photographs and iconic photographs in the book probably are from when you shot the September 2nd, 1989 show outside the Astrodome. I think we've got some of those queued up next. Yes. Yeah. And I love this shot. I was looking at this earlier, and I was thinking that Stevie Ray's hands in this shot almost look like something that could have been sculpted by Michelangelo. I mean, they just got a sculptural quality to them almost.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, he had incredibly strong hands, which is going to lead into something that Eric's going to talk about. But he also had very beautiful hands, and they were, like any guitar player, a very, very important part of his sound. The hands and the mind and what goes, between to join them. But the hands are more important perhaps than the guitar or the amps or pedals or anything. And in Stevie's case, the big set of strings that he used, he needed to have incredibly strong hands. And Eric will talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because the legend is evidently that he played something like 13 gauge strings, which is, crazy thick. Evidently, Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck played something like 8 gauge, and Hendrix played 9s or 10s. Did he really play, Eric, did he really play 13 gauge strings?
Yeah, I heard that back in the late 70s, early 80s, he was playing 13s and 14s. I know that when he got clean, he definitely went down. There's an interview with Doyle Bramhall II talking about how he told him that after he got off cocaine that he couldn't play the big strings anymore. So, but I mean, like, I think he went down to 11s, which, like, you know, by standard guitar player sizes is still, you know, that's a normal person heavy string.
Yeah.
Like, and you can tell also with the heavy strings, like he had, look at those hands. I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't any room in his hands for his veins, so they had to live on the outside. But I mean, he also had like giant jumbo frets put on his guitar so that, like, you know, he could really, yeah, just Keith definitely, he did tune down a half step. So
yes, I just saw that too.
makes
I
it,
think we should go to the next photograph too while you're talking about all this, and yeah, bending the strings and the effort that took and the way it sounded. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask Eric, for those of us who are have less guitar technical knowledge, what's the benefit or the advantage of using the heavier gauge strings for the type of music that Stevie Ray was playing?
tone, baby. It's all tone. Like big strings, you get that big, thick tone.
Okay. And then
Stevie had pretty much the best tone ever. So.
Yeah. So the thick string just gives the tone more body, and okay.
Definitely more snap.
Yeah. So Tracy, talk about this particular photograph. Now, this was in front of the Astrodome, right? The one that we're looking at right now.
Yes, it was called the biggest party in Texas or something like that, and it was the Who, Joe Ely, Fabulous Thunderbirds with Jimmy Vaughan, of course, and also actually Doyle Bramhall II was playing as the second guitar player with the Thunderbirds at that time, and the Who were headlining, and they did all the Texans were out there in the hot parking lot. It was a not 4th of July, Labor Day show, and you know, just hot as can be. Out in the asphalt, it was literally, you know, probably 110 degrees, perhaps more, but it was very much worth it. I mean, you know, it takes a lot out of you. This was shot with Nikons because the longer lens on a Nikon, okay, let me go back. On a rangefinder, the optimum focal length for the lens is not going to be more than about 50 or 75 millimeter. When somebody's playing in an arena, you need at least a 105, 135, 180, providing you're in front of the stage. Just, you know, because it's different real estate. You need different stuff for that. So this was shot with the Nikons. And they're heavy. So, you know, shooting an outdoor show in the heat is very, very demanding. I was totally wiped out when I got home from this show. I actually almost lost the 2 rolls of film that I shot of Stevie. So I was pretty happy that I found them.
Yeah. But you can see in the shot how far he's bending those strings. I mean, he's halfway across the fretboard with those top strings. Now, Tracy, you said a while ago that your boyfriend told you to hey, wait just a second, Kyle, back it up one more. Back it up. Yeah, right there. Your boyfriend told you to always get the guitar. What's the deal with we don't have the whole guitar in the picture. Is there a reason for that in this particular?
Yes, there is actually. Well, first of all, in this particular case, it's a better photograph because you look at his face, and the main thing in here is his hand on the fretboard and his face. But it's not just that. It was so hot and so crowded, and that I literally could not move myself or the camera to get everything in. And Stevie, I'm not saying he was a show-off, not at all, but he knew when I was shooting him, so he'd play to the camera. And so I've got this, you know, fairly long lens on there, fairly telephoto lens, not a zoom. So the closer he got, the more would get cropped.
Yeah. And you couldn't move enough to get any more in the picture in this particular case.
Well, I couldn't move. You know, normally, I mean, even in a big crowd in like Antone's or somewhere, you know, people know that you know whoever's playing and everything. for the most part, people are nice, and they'll let you lean back or whatever, especially if you take your hat off. But not at this show. There was just nowhere to go. There was no room at all to move, and I think that's enough camera nerd stuff for this one.
We had a comment from Uncle Dom and Aunt Nikki that the video, there's a video out of Stevie Ray's fingertips and talks about the super glue. And we talked about that the other day, guys, that he when his calluses would split, he would super glue them back together. And then Eric I think you mentioned that that's actually something that a lot of guitarists do.
Yeah, it's a pretty common practice, but I think we all pretty much learned it from Stevie.
So he invented the super glue trick, huh?
Well, I don't know if he invented it, but I think that's where we all got it from.
I don't think he invented it, but yeah. Someone just asked about catching his fingers at any particular, try to catch him at any particular moment. Well, this would be one of them. And then if we move to the next image, the contact sheet, the next image.
There we go.
Well, yeah, this is the contact sheet from that show. You can kind of see in the ones on the left, you can see the Astrodome in the background. This is the contact sheet that Stevie picked 3 of my all-time favorite pictures and 3 of his all-time favorites that I took. It's in that second strip from the right. He picked 3 of those as his favorites, and he is playing the solo from Texas Flood. And if we go to the next image, there they are.
Yeah.
Those are. He wasn't picking them for any particular thing. I mean, I think this show I was shooting for Guitar World magazine, but he just picked them for fun, for to tell me which ones he liked. So that's what I call the Texas Flood triptych, and you can just see as he goes through that solo in Texas Flood. So this is where, capturing what his hands are doing and what his face is doing. And once again, to go to a baseball metaphor, if you ever watch Nolan Ryan pitch, he kind of pitched with his eyebrows. Stevie played with his eyebrows. I mean, if you look at his eyebrows and his face in these pictures, he kind of, whatever his eyes and the expression he was doing, that's what his hands were doing. And that's the sound that was coming out.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit in time and go to another photograph and where we got a little something different going on here. Tracy, talk about this photograph, and then I think we want to get into a little bit into the gear, some of the gear that we can see. But
there's a lot of gear in this picture for sure. Okay, well, this was taken at the Texas Flood album release party at Fitzgerald's in June of 1983, and I think it's the last time he played at Fitzgerald's at his own show. We'll get into that later, but. This is the guitar Lenny that his wife, whose name was Lenny, and some friends bought him. They all put in, whatever amount of money they needed to, and they bought him this guitar. And he played the song, the instrumental Lenny on that. The guitar, his wife, the guitar, and the song are all named Lenny. He also played Riviera Paradise on it. So both of those instrumentals, I don't know what, Stevie really loved this guitar and it meant a lot to him. And he just wanted to do this particular guitar for those particular songs, but maybe in part due to the maple neck. And just to quickly go over things, he's playing Third Stone from the Sun here, and he must have broken the string on number 1 because that was not what he would usually play on Lenny. And the other guitars there, he's got a single pickup Strat that Charlie Wirtz put back together for him, that the guitar player from Vanilla Fudge had put a humbucker in, and so it was kind of hollowed out, and he fixed it up for Stevie with 1 pickup, and it had a really interesting tone. And the one next to it, I think that's the Tokay, the Strat copy from Japan, which interestingly has the same name as a Hungarian wine, but I don't know why. And then the amps, of course, and I'll let Eric take over.
Okay, well, I mean, this is like his early 80s setup, late 70s. He usually played with a vibroverb and a super reverb. You can see the vibroverb down there by his leg, which is like, at this point in time, it's just an amp that's synonymous with Stevie because there's only 5,000 of them or so made in 64. And they're just incredible sounding amps. I know that his was modded pretty heavily. I've got one and it sounds incredible, but it's all stock. One thing I will say about Lenny, the guitar, is that guitar actually lives in Austin, Texas right now. It was sold at auction at the first Crossroads Festival in Dallas. I saw it there. Guitar Center bought it, and now it's on display. You know, whenever this lockdown is over, it's on display at the Guitar Center in North Austin off Anderson Lane. I have to say that obviously I've never played this guitar, but the one guy that I do know that's played all these guitars is Alan Haynes here in Austin. And Alan Haynes, obviously, he told me number one was a very special guitar, but he also told me that Lenny was a parts guitar, and he didn't think it was that great. But I mean, you know, every guitar is different in another person's hands. Talking about real quick the single pickup Strat back there, and how it had a very unique sound. Is the only thing I was going to say about that is that any guitar, if you just have a single pickup wired directly to the output, you know, with obviously a tone knob and volume, but whatever, they always sound a little bit more. It just sound a little bit more. I don't know what it is. I think it's like the passive latency of other pickups kind of maybe draining the signal or something a little bit, but every single pickup guitar I have just got a little bit of extra oomph to it.
That's interesting. Okay, I think we've got a picture coming up here of.
Yeah. Speaking of guitars sounding different,
Yeah.
when different people play them. Yeah. When Jimmy Vaughan played number one, he sounded just like Jimmy Vaughan, which is, you know, really cool. But yeah, Jimmy has a very distinctive sound, and he's one of the most incredible guitar players I've ever seen. I actually met him and photographed him about a year before I saw Stevie, and I was just blown away, you know. And he, at that point with the Thunderbirds, he would play pedal steel for part of the show. So, and
When you think about it,
yeah.
with Jimmy, like you think about it, a lot of people, like I feel like they compare the two and they give Jimmy a bad rap or something, but it's like you have to understand that like you had to be such a badass that you inspire Stevie Ray Vaughan. Like he was Stevie's biggest inspiration, you know, and that's incredible.
Yeah.
This being World Book Day, I'll put it this way: it's the way Jimmy plays his style. It's very succinct. It's like Hemingway, and Stevie played like Faulkner. And I love both of those guys, but their style is completely different. So yeah. I think that's a good way to put it on World Book Day. And then
Stevie Moore.
Yeah, the guitar that and they both of them got into jazz somewhat in a really tasty way. Both of the things they recorded and then they're playing on stage as well.
So tell us about this photograph, Tracy. Where and when and all that
okay. Kind of. This was taken at Sam Houston Coliseum in February of 1986. And Stevie, this was a time when Stevie was in pretty bad shape with drugs and alcohol. And he had a lot of company there, including the photographer. Because I don't know what I did, but I was using the Nikon with the correct lens for this kind of shot. And I just beat the crap out of it and it stopped working. So I grabbed the Leica out of my bag, and which is, of course, as we discussed, an amazing camera, but wasn't really the right one for the big arena. But yeah, I mean, you can tell by the way Stevie looks that you know, he's not healthy here. And yet, you know, the show was incredible. But I mean, and this was after a sound check where he was drinking screwdrivers with a gram of cocaine in them and stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, he's got, that's Jimmy's Dan Electro baritone, Longhorn baritone. And obviously they switched guitars and of course sounded exactly like themselves when they switched. And then the amps, let's get into the amps a little bit.
Yeah, we got what, a Fender Super Reverb. I'm obviously looking at my notes. Eric wouldn't have to do that.
Oh yeah. All right, so I'll tell you one thing. There's several things about this picture that are so cool to me. First off, we got to mention the mud flap girl baffles. But this is a time when, you know, after like 1984, Stevie was using Dumbles. You can see the Dumble sitting there on top of a vibroverb. That just the head sitting by itself. The cabinets for that are behind the baffles. But when he switched over to Dumble amplifiers, when he brought those into his stack of amps, he started using EV speakers instead of JBLs, which he used mostly in the late 70s, early 80s. It's pretty well publicized that he switched completely to EVs at that time, but because of Tracy's picture, right there at the bottom, you can see a Super Reverb with 4 JBL speakers. So it's kind of making a liar out of a lot of people there. Not that really matters, but then on top of the amp cabinets for the Dumble, you see a Fender Vibratone, which is a Leslie. They were made in the late 60s, early 70s when CBS owned Fender and Leslie. So they just made the Leslie 16, the Leslie 18, and the Fender Vibratone were pretty much all the same thing, just with different cosmetics. Now they don't blast out the front. There's actually a styrofoam baffle that rotates in front of the speaker that has a scoop in it and just kind of slings the sound around. That diagonal thing you can see on that Vibratone, it's kind of partially obscured by the label. That is to clearance a bar that has the access of that baffle on it. So it actually slings the sound out the sides and the top. So you can see there's a mic there right on the, you know, on the left there. And then you can actually see a mic through the opening of his arm. And then there's a mic on top. And then the sound guy can just, you know, for different effects. Usually when I use a Leslie or a Vibratone every gig that I play, and we usually pan it hard right and left in the PA so like it just ping pongs around the room. So I mean, this is, as far as like the technical aspect of the amps and his technique of setting up stuff, this is an incredible picture.
Eric, say just a word once again for those of us who have less deep guitar knowledge. What's the big difference between the baritone guitar and the like the number one that Jimmy's playing in this picture?
Well, the baritone guitar is like, they're going to be somewhere between a bass and a regular guitar. And especially with a Dan Electro like that, with the lipstick pickups, it's going to be that deep but very clean kind of twangy sound.
Almost country sound.
Yeah, but it's like when you think of like someone playing like almost like surf guitar, but it's more like desert. Like that's the sound. That's 100% it.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, you mentioned that you know, and we don't want to dwell on the negative, but at this point in his life, you said Stevie Ray was not in great shape. And on the other hand, that kind of sets up the fact that, you know, he went through recovery and got clean, wrote some songs about it, about the process. And you were there to photograph him at some of the first shows he played after he cleaned up, right?
Yes, this is one of the first shows, or one from that tour. This is his first show, his first clean show in Houston. And he did tell me before the show that he was kind of nervous to play without the crutch. And, you know, you really can't tell in this photograph. I think it was a really great show. And it was easy to tell that he was, you know, so into the music. And once he got into playing, then you get an expression on his face like this, which reflects his mood. that hey, this is not so hard, you know.
Yeah.
See
Now, which
me in the
guitar,
music and the crowd, and same thing. Yeah.
which guitar is he playing in this picture?
This is a Hendrix style Strat that I don't know the exact year of that. I think they made them periodically. I think 1980 they made some, and then like 1996 or 7. What do you know about that, Eric?
I think this is just like a Hendrix tribute Strat, like you're saying. Like, this is not one of his old ones. You can tell that the guitar was made to be a Hendrix tribute because
Oh yeah.
the logo, you can read it. It's not upside down. If it was a 70s or big headstock from the late 60s, early 70s, it would be upside down, obviously. As far as like flipping a neck on a guitar like that, the Hendrix style, major advantages of it is that your bass string is longer, so you have a little more resonance, but actually the top strings, the skinny strings, as it were, are they're easier to bend. They're shorter scale. So you get that kind of funky, I don't know, stringy feel to them. Stringy. What a terrible.
Well, they look at them. I mean, they look stringy. They actually look like strings.
They look like strings, man.
Yeah.
Does it have anything? Does that affect the tuning at all?
Oh. Well.
It affects tuning the guitar because it's all upside down and backwards. So that, I mean, like every time I've ever played a Hendrix style guitar like that, I'm just like, you know, it got a lot easier when I got sober. So I'll say that.
Let's see now. Here's again a shot that probably a lot of us have seen and appreciated.
That's from that same show. That was January 31st, 1987, and this is a headdress that Jimmy gave him that Stevie wore with a lot of respect. The Vaughans actually had some Cherokee blood, but the main thing about this one for me is that him wearing that headdress gave me the opportunity to copy one of my favorite photographers, Edward S. Curtis, who's the guy who shot all of the very famous Native American pictures that you see. And he also basically had to sell his soul to J.P. Morgan to get it financed. So, you know, sometimes it's difficult getting books published, right, Tom?
Every once in a while,
Process for sure. Yeah.
Can I say real quick?
I don't think no souls were sold or anything like that, but it's always tough. I was lucky to find a good publisher like y'all.
Thank you so much, Eric. You were trying to get in there.
Yeah. This thing. Just want to say real quick on this guitar. This is actually red. This is one of his, you know, favorite Strats. This was a guitar in 1983 on Austin City Limits. It had the original neck on it, and I think it was like a 62 Strat. But red was a custom color Strat from Fender, and when they would get a custom order, they would. It was kind of like the Model T. They all made, you know, all Model Ts were black. All Strats coming from the factory stock were sunburst. But then when they would get a custom order, they would go back and they would paint one and they would paint over it. Usually, I mean, if they didn't have any ready to paint a custom color. So on this one, on red was painted like that. And you can see if you look right below the pick guard in the curve of the guitar, the black is wearing through.
Wow.
That part of the sunburst.
Yeah.
And this was not a neck from a Hendrix tribute, so you can see that the actual logo is upside down, like it would be if you just took a left-handed neck and put it on a Strat. So, and this is an amazing picture. This is so cool.
Thank you.
So,
it's one of my favorites. It is with the warm tone and everything, and that, you know, it's you don't necessarily think, well, I'm going to go to see an incredible guitar player at a big arena, and I'm going to copy this guy who shot Native Americans at the turn of the 19th century, turn of the 20th century, rather. So, you know, that's always good to have that opportunity.
Yeah. Now you took as we've already seen, Tracy, you took some amazing shots of Stevie in performance and on stage, but you actually also took quite a few pictures of him off stage and sort of more candid shots. Here's one that got a couple of guys in it that most of us probably recognize. You want to tell us about this?
Yes, this is, and then once again, like the picture of him with Jimmy, this is an amazing amount of Texas talent here. Joe Ely, who's just an incredible musician, and he just put an album out. If you look at his website, I think it's still ely.com. But he was playing at Fitzgerald's, and Stevie was in town playing at the music hall. This was after he'd left the small venues. It was July of 1984. But he came over to see Joe, and he sat in for a couple of songs. And then being having that goofy little brother persona, he decided that he would push the buttons on Joe's bolo tie calculator while I was taking the picture, and I'm very glad he did. So and this was when Joe had an album out called High Res, which was pretty much ahead of its time, and yeah, so
It's
there's
always
Stevie.
it's cool.
Joe also is in a way like a Texas David Bowie. Joe has an incredible talent for picking guitar players, such as David Grissom, who also wrote one of the forwards of the book. And David Grissom is just an amazing player, and he's also an Austin and Texas treasure who was actually born in Kentucky.
Well, it's great to see great musicians enjoying each other's company and hanging out. And then this shot here, what's going on in this picture, Tracy?
Okay, this was just outside the Coliseum for that same February show as the picture of him and Jimmy on stage. And he's signing bootleg albums, his own bootleg albums that someone handed him. And he looked at me and said, why am I doing this? Why am I making my own bootlegs more valuable? But he did it anyway because he loved his fans, and he realized, you can't have a career or play what you want without fans, and so he did it anyway. And also, there's that love-hate thing with bootlegs that a lot of musicians have, because almost any artist will admit to having their own bootlegs of their own favorite artists. So same thing, it's like, you're 16 or 17 years old and really getting your chops down on the guitar, and oh, here's a bootleg Hendrix, here's a bootleg Albert Collins or Albert King. I'm buying that,
Yeah.
So yeah. And this was also, as I said, that same show. This was while he was drinking that spiked screwdriver. So yeah.
Maybe that took his mind off the bootlegs a little bit.
Yeah.
I got this picture is so great. Yeah, there's just a chat that popped up. So humbled to be signing bootlegs. That's the thing. Like with Stevie, like it's like he's got the smirk. Like you realize it's kind of messed up, but at the same time, he's so gracious. Like he could not do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Also, I always thought this picture. There's a character that Gary Oldman played in a movie called True Romance. He's a pimp, and the way he's dressed up and everything, he looks a lot like Stevie in this picture, which is interesting if you ever see that movie.
Well, after, of course, we lost Stevie way too early in 1990, but obviously his music has lived on not only in his own recordings, but in the work of a whole generation of younger musicians. And here's one of them right here, who also happens to be with us on the Zoom chat. This is Eric Tesmer, and Tracy, you've taken quite a few awesome photographs of Eric.
Yeah, this is at the Sexton Pub, which is a venue in Austin that's been having a lot of live stream shows to keep things going. And if you get a chance to see any, you got to try to support them. They're really a great venue, and in fact, David Grissom plays there every Tuesday, happy hour for free. So that alone should tell you need to keep that venue going. And places like that, and Antone's and the Continental Club, it's they're not doing anything. It's not like they can sell food or something like a lot of the restaurants delivery and so on. But anyway, Eric, that's a real 59 Strat. And I think Eric's a truly fine player, and I'm very happy to have met him. I almost consider him a kid brother I never had, even with the beard,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, that's quite a beard, man.
Grew it all myself.
Yeah, I think men grow them so they have something to fiddle with. Yeah,
I think so.
I shouldn't have gone there, but anyway.
Eric, let me jump in here, and actually, this is a nice segue, because we had a question back earlier and this gets into something I wanted you to talk about anyway. Someone asked, what was your first exposure to Stevie Ray and his music that you recall? And I would love for you to talk about that, and also just to talk a little bit about, as a musician and a guitarist, what is it about Stevie Ray's music that keeps you coming back?
All right. Well, the first time I remember being aware of Stevie, I was a kid. I was a little kid. I know that my parents, I think they were gone to see some type of band recital for my older brother. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. And the only channel we got really consistently was PBS. And so I grew up watching Austin City Limits. And I think it was when his 89 Austin City Limits show aired. And I saw this because Austin City Limits would come on late at night, and I didn't know who he was. I saw the SRV. My dad's a guitar player. And he gets Guitar Player magazine and all kinds of stuff, and he has my whole life. But I saw the pick guard with the SRV on. I was like, I know I've seen this guy before in pictures, but even then I didn't even really know what I was seeing, and I was just mesmerized by it. And then when I got into my teens, Stevie just became the best friend I never had. I mean, like, there's just something about him. Like, I think everybody on this call can appreciate it. I mean, they know. Like, when you hear Stevie, you're hearing the truth. Like, it's so honest, it's so real, so powerful. In the foreword of the book, I wrote that, like, his music touches people, but I mean, that's not enough. Like, it's to describe it, like, it just grabs you. Like, it goes through every part of your soul. I mean, it's just so soulful. It's so real. Like, when you're a teenager and you don't even know what you're feeling, you don't understand what's going on, you're convinced that nobody else does. Like, I always felt like Stevie would have understood me. And just, like, he always just seemed like the most pure and humble guy. And when I moved to Austin and I started meeting all my heroes, just people like Clifford Antone. Clifford Antone, when I met him, was just like the most down-to-earth person, such a patron of the arts. He introduced me to Jimmy Vaughan, who I like to say he was so hip, he made me feel like an elbow. But, Ellen Haynes, got to be friends with Tommy Shannon and Chris Layton and all these guys. And the thing was, like, they confirmed what I always knew, was that this dude was just like one of the greatest dudes you could know. And that, Tommy's quoted as saying, like, if you knew Stevie, you would just expect this sound to come out of him,
Yeah. Now, Eric, take another couple of minutes, if you would, and just kind of tell us what you've been up to. What's obviously sheltering in place, but
yeah, it's not too bad here, really, to be honest, like where I am. Right now, obviously sheltering in place, I'm writing a lot of songs. I've been putting out some YouTube videos about how to modify your effects pedals. Just finished one on wah pedals, but on March 13th, I released a track that I did with Nancy Wilson from Hart. We've got a project going together that's really cool. But we covered Policy of Truth by Depeche Mode because we figured nobody would expect us to make the song. It's great because we released this song. We're like, this thing is awesome. This is going to make some waves. And then the whole world just shut down.
Yeah.
So if you got, there is a full album on the way, to answer this question that just popped up. But go on Spotify, check out Policy of Truth. We think it's a banger. I just put out last year EP2. There was EP1 in 2016. And we're working on the third one right now. So got a lot of stuff going on. If you want to see anything about me, I mean, obviously I don't want to talk about me so much on this, but if you want to check out my stuff on Instagram or Facebook, it's at Eric Tesmer Band. And then the website is just erictesmer.com.
Yeah. And by the way, I should mention that when we're done here, both Eric and Tracy are going to provide some additional information to us that will go out to the people who are on the Zoom right now, ways you can connect with them and find out more about what they're doing. And so we'll definitely want to include that information. Eric, we got one more question for you, and then I want to keep moving. But can you tell us the backstory on your 59 Strat?
Yeah, this is kind of crazy. I bought my 59 Strat from Austin Vintage Guitars when Austin, before Austin boomed. I found it in, all right, so I'm trying to think of how to tell the story the best. So Austin Vintage Guitars was right around the corner in the same building as Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas, where Stevie got #1. And it was a very similar kind of vibe because I walked into Austin Vintage and I saw this guitar, and obviously, you know, it was this old Strat, and, you know, at that point in my life, I was 21. I was, you know, dreaming of owning an old Strat. I had an old Strat, but it, you know, had been put together in pieces. But this thing, there's just something special about it. And so I went over and I played it, you know, and I went in there and I played it every day for like probably an hour. And this thing was so messed up at that point. Like the frets were worn down to the board. The pick guard was cracked and it was like kind of bending up into the low E string. And it was really, really expensive. So at that time in my career, I was just starting to make waves in Austin. Like, people were starting to know who I was. And so the owner of the shop, Steve Fulton, I was like, you know, you got to put this up, you know, like someday I'm going to be rich and famous or something, you know, or at least rich, you know, and I'll buy this guitar, you know, just put it up, I just need this guitar. This is my guitar. And he's like, yeah, kid. Well, yeah, you know. And then after 2 weeks of this, I walked in there and it was gone. And I was, man, it's like, no. I mean, what? Oh my gosh, you know, who bought this thing? You know, I have to sell a kidney. I have to, you know, whatever it takes. I'll rob a bank. I don't care. And he was like, I'll put it up. So I was like, whoa, you know, so, you know, go through my 20s, flash forward to, I think that was like 2003. It had to be 2003, I think. Anyway, so flash forward to 2008 and the market crashes, right? So he brings his guitar back out. I walk in one day and it's there again. I was like, oh my God, my guitar's here. So, sorry, I'm trying to keep this short, but I was like, oh my God, you got to put up just a little while longer. Like, obviously I knew about it, you know, obviously it was always in my mind, but it was kind of a far off fantasy. And he's like, man, market crashed. South by is coming up next month. I got bills to pay. I got to move this thing. Of course, market crashed. So this thing had been discounted considerably. So I was like, I can borrow that. So, you know, I went out and I borrowed the money to get it, and I got it. So you know, it was on or around February 12th, 2008. You know, I don't know if I remember the date exactly, but anyway, this guitar, I mean, I found out later that this is a guitar that whenever Eric Johnson would go into Austin Vintage Guitars and test his amps, because the amp tech, Bill Webb, works at Austin Vintage Guitars. Anytime he'd go in to test his amps, he would grab that guitar because it was the best sounding Strat in the shop. So, to December of '59. I mean,
Oh, I was going to say something else about that other picture. You know, you really can't tell much difference between this picture and some of the older ones that I took at Fitzgerald's or whatever. This was taken with a Sony digital full frame camera. And that's what I went to for digital. I'm very happy with those. I think they're amazing cameras. They make sensors for a lot of the other camera companies, and they have great lenses, and I'm happy to have found them. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Yeah.
Which is a Leica picture. This is Charlie Sexton, incredible guitar player, highly underrated, record producer, singer, songwriter, et cetera.
music
And
Dylan's band.
yeah, and oh yeah, Bob Dylan, he plays with Bob Dylan too. And Doyle Bramhall II, the son of Stevie's songwriting partner, Doyle Bramhall, obviously. This was an Archangels reunion show. They formed a band with Tommy Shannon and Chris Layton around late 1990, early 1991. And this was a reunion show in 2005 at Antone's on Fifth Street. And that's Clifford Antone, who was an incredible person, great supporter and cheerleader for the blues, let's say. And he treated all of the old blues men and women with the utmost respect, brought them to Austin, got them playing again. And these are the guys that, you know, Stevie and Jimmy saw when they were teenagers. And that's where they started playing. And Clifford Antone is just, you know, there really should be a Clifford Antone statue as well, I think. Clifford asked me to take this picture, and I'm so happy that he did.
Yeah, that's nice. Then we got a shot here of a guy that's making some waves these days.
Oh, big time. This is Gary Clark Jr., and it was a solo show that he did at the Paramount Theater, which is a circa 1915 building, and I think it was a movie theater first in Austin. Incredible venue, and these were wonderful shows. And I think Gary's playing something like Catfish Blues, but this was my first thing with a digital camera, where I was using what Ansel Adams called visualization, which is what, you know, as you take the picture, you see the finished product. You see the way you want the print to be. And when I shot this, of course, you know, you're shooting in color. But that's how I saw it, with, again, the warm tone and the shadows and so on and so forth. Because being at an older venue with this particular Gibson and the song he was playing, it just kind of lent itself to that kind of treatment. And as I shot the picture in color, I saw that. I saw what you're looking at on the screen. And I think it's my favorite picture I ever took of Gary. I guess we're running out of time. And here's Ian Moir, who's another fantastic Texas guitar player, songwriter, singer. And he lives in Seattle, around Seattle now. But he also was someone who was, you know, saddled with that next Stevie Ray Vaughan when he started playing and had his first records came out in 1993 or so. And while he absolutely loves Stevie, and you can see there, that's his favorite Stevie picture. He's got so much more than that. He's such a fine artist in his own right. Just like Eric. I mean, when I pick, and Gary, when I pick the guys to be the the legacy, Stevie's legacy. I didn't pick guys who just slavishly imitated him. I picked guys that had some of that spirit and soul, but didn't just, you know, go, oh, I'm just going to stand up here in a hat and with a whammy bar, a left-handed whammy bar on my Strat, and I'm going to play every song Stevie played and make the same faces and whatever. I'm not really into tribute bands, but these guys in their own way, and even Nolly Colt from Sweden, who's the guitar player with Vintage Trouble, he also wrote one of the forewords because I wanted somebody whose viewpoint was totally out there from another country, someone who loves Stevie. But you know, it's not emulating, but just catching some of that spirit, just as Stevie did with Hendrix.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up the slideshow here, I want to make sure that, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. We are pushing the boundaries of our time, but as you see on your screen here, you can get a 30% off discount on the book Seeing Stevie Ray if you will go to our website, www.tamupress.com, and you'll use the code SRV30. And I think you can see how we figured that out. And that code will be good until May 1st. And so please take advantage of that. We are recording this Zoom chat, and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel. And you can watch it again, or if somebody that you know that wasn't able to join us tonight, you can direct them to that to our YouTube channel, and they can watch that. But let me get to a couple of questions here before we conclude.
Yeah, I noticed one of the questions was that whether you can get prints from the book or not. And you can. When you get your follow-up email, it'll have my website, theheightsgallery.com. And thank you, people who are saying it's a great book. I really appreciate that. It's my kid. So thank you for praising my child.
Can I just hop in here real quick and say something?
Yeah.
I just want to say that I've known Tracy for years. You know, we've been big support of each other. And I just, you know, she's seen me struggle personally and musically with my career. And I've seen the same with her. And like, I've seen how hard, like, she's worked on this book and the struggle she's gone through to get it done. And this book is 100% worth all that struggle. Y'all, like, if they were asking $100 for this book, it'd be more than worth it. But luckily for you, they're not. So seriously, this is an amazing book by an amazing person about an amazing person. So get it.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And you're in it, and you.
I mean, just icing on top, you know.
So yes, you can get prints at theheightsgallery.com. That's the website. And then the Instagram account is also The Heights Gallery. There's a lot more current stuff on there. There's things that I got scanned for the book with my friend Robert Taylor, who helped me out and got a lot of the stuff scanned. There are a lot of people who helped out a lot with this book who are in the acknowledgments, most of them.
Tracy, let me ask you a couple more questions that have come in about your photography. When you were making prints, you made your own prints, right?
Right. Yeah, I still do for the most part. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that pulls me to another question. You're shooting digital now. Tell us, you use Photoshop and Lightroom and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I used to use the wet darkroom and make archival fiber-based prints, which, I mean, you talk about COVID-19 messing up your lungs, try making archival prints in the darkroom. So I really love digital for many reasons. And one of them is being able to sit on your butt in front of a computer and make a really true fine art print. Lightroom is, it's kind of like you put your raw image files in there, and just like developing film, you know, you can make various adjustments and so on. And then Photoshop is where you make the adjustments to make the print. When you have a raw file from a digital camera, of course, it's color, and then you can change it to black and white. That's one of the good things about that. And Photoshop and Lightroom, the way I use them is basically just the same as a wet darkroom. I don't do things like take something out and put something else in, or some of the strange and creative things that people do. I just am after basically the same thing that I used to do. And in the, since digital started, it was incredibly expensive and very low resolution when it started, and now it's a lot cheaper, and the resolution has surpassed film, and it's really great. Technology is a cool thing.
Yeah, well, now
anyway.
That brings me to the last, I guess maybe not the last question, but another question about your photography. I had a question about do you when you were shooting like at a concert venue, like a lot of the pictures that we saw, were you using flash?
A lot of times I would use a fill flash, yeah, because of the hat, and trying to get lights under the brim of the hat. And Stevie didn't mind at all. In fact, I asked him about it, and he said, "Well, I think it's kind of cool because I know when you took the picture."
Okay. Yeah.
So it's someone like him. It was great to do that, and you can get some really cool effects, like that first picture where he's got his head turned and he's smiling, and get that ambient light effect, and that's wonderful. But yeah.
Well, the artistry in the images is evident, as somebody commented on here a little earlier. Somebody wrote a comment on here that said to Tracy, that said your photos were what actually brought them to Stevie Ray's music. And I don't know how much better a compliment a photographer could have than that your art actually pulled somebody into some of the greatest guitar playing that's ever gone on.
Well, that's great. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Folks, we are actually a little bit past our time, and you've been a wonderful audience. I've enjoyed it, so I hope that you have too. And Tracy and Eric,
we should do another one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I know, Zoom and doing this, it's kind of a new thing. And for us, all of us anyway, I know that we had a few technical difficulties because while we were talking, I got like 15 text messages from people going, I don't think I got the right link. I don't think I got the right email and all that. Yeah. So yeah, we should do something so that everyone can get in, and yeah.
We'll definitely, again, this whole thing will be up on our YouTube channel, and we will put, the press is easy to follow on Facebook. We're at our website is tamupress.com. And so there's lots of different ways to find us and lots of ways to find our YouTube channel where you can watch this.
And I'm sure Eric and I will put links to it on social media.
Yeah,
don't worry about that. We'll be out there doing that too.
We'll get them up there everywhere we can. Folks, thanks again. Tracy, thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much. Jason, who joined us from his home in Austin, thank you very much for being here. And we hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's been fascinating, but the book is even better. So make sure you go get it. And I believe that's all we got, folks. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.